It's great to see everybody tonight. We are very fortunate that we get to now sort of write another chapter in Bridgewater's history by being part of this committee and hopefully making a contribution to the town through the charter updates that we will be working on. And then, hopefully have an impact that will affect the town in a positive way. I'm looking forward to working with each of you. Hopefully this, virtual meeting stuff won't go on too much longer because it's always much nicer to be face-to-face with everyone and getting to know everybody in that way. But I guess since Scott, you missed the last meeting, I think it makes sense to take a few minutes to kind of go around and do introductions again, just so you know everything about everybody else and we hear about you. So do you mind starting, Scott?
I don't mind at all. You might hear my daughter's making dinner in the background, so she's pounding out the chicken, if that's what you're wondering what that noise is. So yeah, I'm a former town council member. I was born and raised in Bridgewater, and graduated from Bridgewater State, left to go do a little bit of flying for the Army, and that's where Ed and I know each other from many years ago. And then returned back here because I like Bridgewater and live here. I've got my wife and 2 kids, 2 dogs, cat, and that's about it. I was the first vice president of the town council and second president back in 2011, 2012, left the council in 2015. And that's about it.
All right. Who wants to go next? All right, Steve, why don't you go?
Sure. Steve Purcell. I know most of you here already met me last time. Like I said before, I've only lived in Bridgewater for coming up on 2 years. Before that, I was in Washington, D.C. I'm a 6-year veteran of the Air Force and a current employee of the Secret Service. So that's what brought me to Bridgewater, is my current job. This is my first time ever getting involved in any town politics or any committee or anything of that sort. So this is a learning curve for me, but I'm looking forward to it and working with all of you.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Thomas?
Sure. So this is mostly for Scott. I just like Steve, I'm relatively new to Bridgewater. I moved here 2017, so about 3 years ago. Before that, I grew up in Pembroke, and then I moved to Boston, then back to Quincy, then down here. I also, like Steve, work for the federal government. This is my first time getting involved in state or local politics.
Great. Cleone?
I've been in Bridgewater since 2007. I have 2 children, a boy and a girl, and my husband. He served in local government for almost 2 years. He was on the finance committee and the ZBA. I have 17 years with the federal government where I oversaw the homeless grants here in New England. So I have that federal perspective, and I had to work with local governments and nonprofits. So although I haven't served myself, I do have that experience and have actually been enjoying reading through all the charters and stuff. So it's been really nice to use that experience again. I did resign from the federal government in 2018 to start my own business. So I'm an entrepreneur here in Bridgewater.
Very good. Thank you. Darren?
Yes, I built my house in Bridgewater in 1993. And so I've been a resident since then. I work in IT for an insurance company, and I'm also an enrolled agent. I do taxes seasonally for H&R Block. And this is new to me. I have no experience in government.
All right, great. Welcome. Josh, how about you want to chime in?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I am the staff assistant for your guys' committee. I'm also the staff assistant for several other committees in the town. I've been doing this for say 5 years now. I actually moved to Bridgewater 8 years ago from Michigan, graduated from Bridgewater State, and I work in insurance as my kind of main job.
Great. Thank you, Josh. We're very fortunate to have you with us. So thank you very much for taking this on. Lastly, myself, I've been in Bridgewater since '94, moved from Stoughton, grew up originally in Stoughton, went to Stoughton High School and such. Have a computer science degree, got a job back in the early 80s working for the phone company, and I made a career out of it. Spent 35 years there. Retired about 5 years ago, and got involved originally in the first charter. I was on the Town Government Study Committee. I can fill you in a little bit more on that because I'd like to give you a little history on how we came to be where we are today. Raised 4 kids here in Bridgewater, and just enjoying life right now. And just got the bug in me again to get back involved a little bit. So I'm excited to be involved again and working with you all on this effort. So, all right, let's go to, you all got the agenda. We've done the introduction. So I think, before we actually vote on chairman and vice chairman, I thought it would be important to just kind of review the responsibilities, because you don't want to, raise your hand or necessarily, raise your hand on something that you don't understand what it's about. So there is a document that I sent out. Hopefully you've all had a chance to look at it, that talks about what the roles and responsibilities are for the three, actually the chairman, the vice chairman, and then just general committee members. So I'm not going to read through it. I'm assuming you guys have already looked at it. Are there any questions about the chairperson or the vice chairperson that anyone might have at this point?
Ed, I do have a question. We don't have a budget, right? Like, we don't actually have to deal with that.
Well, we don't have a budget right now, but if there was a need to raise funding for something, we could certainly go to the council and
Okay.
ask for an appropriation, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Good question, though. Anyone else have any questions about expectations of those positions, including the committee members in general? No? Okay, great. All right, then if there's no questions, why don't we move on to selecting the chairperson? I guess what I'd like to do first is ask if anyone has an interest in performing that role. Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to nominate someone for that position?
Cleone?
Is that,
She's on mute.
Here, yes, I nominate Ed.
is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second that.
Can I just interrupt for just a second? Whenever you make a motion when we're doing the Zoom meetings, I just need you to state your name before you make the motion. And that goes for seconding the motion as well.
Okay. Do we need to go back and do that or just going
Yeah,
forward?
I have to be a little bit of a stickler on that because
All right.
it's the requirement.
So
So
Cleone?
I say my name, Cleone. I motion. What's the terms?
Yeah, you just say, I make a motion that
Okay.
Ed is the chair.
I see. I make a motion that Ed be the chair.
And Steve Purcell seconded.
Okay, is there any discussion?
Ed, are you okay doing it? I know last week you had some hesitation.
Yes, I'm okay doing it. I just didn't want to necessarily,
Fair enough.
make that assumption, but I'm more than happy to do it. Okay, so then
I think it fits you.
Yeah. I think we'd all benefit from your experience in this.
Yes.
Well, great,
Agreed.
great. All right, then I guess the next step is to take a vote. Josh, can you do that for us?
Yep, I have to take a roll call vote. So I'm just going to go down the list and just need you to say aye. Here. And we'll start with Ed.
I guess aye.
Leone,
Aye.
Darren,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Thomas,
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
All right.
All right, the motion passed. Thank you, folks. I hope I can live up to your expectations. Let me ask you a question, Josh, on this. Since James wasn't here, then he basically forfeited the vote, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, great. All right, thank you for that. So then we move on to the vice chair. Is there anyone that has an interest or has any questions about vice chair at this point?
I have an interest.
Okay, Cleone?
I make a motion. I, Steve Purcell, make a motion that Cleone be vice chair.
I, Scott Pitta, second that motion.
Okay, any discussion? Cleone, you're okay with that?
Yes, I am.
All right. Over to you, Josh.
Ed,
Yes.
Cleone,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Steve,
Aye.
Thomas,
Yes.
Scott.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, congratulations, Cleone.
Thank you.
That's awesome. All right, great. All right, the next item on the agenda, I had asked Josh if he would sort of go over Zoom etiquette, because some of us don't do this on a regular basis, and there are certain do's and don'ts to know about being part of these meetings. And Josh was nice enough to put together this handout that he created. So I'm going to turn it over to him and ask him to kind of go through it, just so that we're all on the same page for future meetings.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're pretty basic rules, and we actually just went over the biggest one, and that's just whenever you make a motion. Whenever you're looking to ask a question, say during a presentation or anything, if you could just raise your hand, that helps me, because I can just check to see who has a question once the conversation's actually finished, and it just keeps interruptions down. It's kind of a small committee, so normally I would just ask that everybody mutes themselves, but you know, as long as you don't have a dog barking in the background or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, just basics of you know, understanding what we can hear you and see you. But otherwise, looking through the rules here.
I think one of the things that I've experienced when I've been part of the town council calls is that every now and then somebody has technical difficulties.
Yeah, and I mean, that does tend to happen in the larger meetings, because there's usually 20 to 30 people, and it's harder for me to see who's actually doing that. If that happens to you, a lot of times what I'll just do is mute you for the time being. And you should get a notification through Zoom that you've been muted. So if you do just get muted randomly, that probably means you had some background noise going on. And you know, I might just say something to you in chat. Another thing is that's kind of frowned upon is chatting privately between members. So if you want to use the chat function, feel free to do so, but just make sure it's being addressed to all. And while I'm on that subject of just being open with the conversation during the meetings, getting a little ahead of us, but whenever we're emailing, just make sure that if you have any questions that you want on the agenda, or you have any questions that you need addressed, just make sure to send them to me and not the whole committee, because then we start violating open meeting laws. So I think that about covers it for the Zoom. It's, you know, kind of new to everybody. So, and it looks like we don't even have members of the public on right now. So one thing that we could do is just make sure that if we do have members of the public, that we are addressing them and just asking them to name themselves in the Zoom meeting. That way we can properly record who they are, anything they say, things like that. Looks like Carlton has a question.
You're on mute.
Yeah.
You're on mute.
Oh, there it is. I finally got the clicker to work. Thank you, Ed, for letting me speak up. I just want to admonish the group, in terms of communication, open meeting law is you can send something out to the whole committee, but you should say in that not for discussion via email or some such thing. That's if you do discuss amongst one or two of you, well, let's say the whole of you discuss, that's an open meeting violation. If one of you talks to one other and includes another one, that's a serial open meeting violation. So it's really important that any discussions you make are in public meetings. You can generally discuss the agenda according to open meeting laws. I have gone through several trainings, and the most recent one was last November that the Attorney General's office put out. It's also important that you establish what rule system you're going to follow. The town council follows Robert's Rules of Order. There are...
Carlton, you're getting a little ahead of us here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Just trying to say, be careful on the open meeting side of stuff.
Yeah, that's actually next on our agenda. We have your wife is going to help us, I think, talk a little bit about that.
I'm going to have to go find her.
Oh, okay. Please do.
I will.
Scott, did you have your hand up?
Yes. In regards to the meeting ID, will that change each meeting or will it remain the same?
For the Zoom meeting,
Yes.
it changes every time. It's a completely different meeting. And then what actually ends up happening is these meetings, they get recorded and they get uploaded to the YouTube, the Town of Bridgewater's YouTube page.
Okay.
But they are different each time.
Have you heard anything, Josh, about when we're going to be able to meet face to face at all? Is that
No, I mean that's a big question. Is when it's going to open up, but we haven't had anything.
Nothing yet. I see. Okay.
Now, is that a town regulation, or are you going off the state?
I think it's a combination. The state is directing Mike Dutton, our town manager, to follow some guidelines, and he's doing that for the town.
All right, very well.
Yeah, and
Right.
that's actually a great question for him. He's probably the most up to date on it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you, Josh, for that, and for pulling this all together for us, and for sort of being the pilot for us on this, because it definitely helps alleviate some of the stress and the additional things that we would have to do to make this work. So we appreciate it greatly.
Yeah, no problem. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to, with it being a new meeting or a new committee, happy to get things set up to how you guys like it. That goes for the meeting minutes, agenda, anything you guys see that you think that it could be improved upon, just let me know, and we can definitely discuss it.
All right, great. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda was to have a review of the open meeting law, and I think Merrill Lee is I've been told she's probably the most expert in our town about this. I know that we've all had a little bit of training on this, but I thought maybe she could just remind us on some of the high points, especially emails. I think we've already touched on that briefly, but I want to make sure that we're all clear on how we communicate with one another behind the scenes and then officially as well. So Merrill Lee, I see you're on, but I don't see your face. Or Carlton? All right, well.
She says she's on her way. The electrons are flowing.
Okay, sounds good.
But I'll just remind, one thing that occurred with agendas, typically the town has public comments to open and close. It's up to the committee how you want to do that.
Yeah, that's one of the things we're going to discuss. Hi, Merrill Lee.
Hi. I thought you wanted me at your next meeting, so I was just sitting out here fiddling around doing another Zoom thing.
Oh, are you prepared to talk?
Well, I can always talk, that.
Okay, I just wanted you to spend a brief, period of time just saying some of the high points of the open meeting law. Remind us, your husband already talked a little bit about emails and stuff, but if you could do that in the next few minutes, that would be great.
Sure. I think one of the first things to remember about the open meeting law is it's called the Sunshine Law. So what that means is keeping a public light on what you are doing, because sometimes nefarious things can happen if things are done in darkness. So this is all about making sure your process is completely public and people can know and see and join you and understand what you're doing. So you don't do things, I think that's maybe what Carlton touched on, you don't do things in private, like email each other and decide what you're gonna talk about and what you're gonna do and what you're gonna vote on at your next meeting. If you have information that you want to send to each other, relevant information about what's coming up on the next agenda, you can certainly do that. You can send out an article you found or an essay you found or something that another town did. You can send that to the whole group. What I do when I do something like that with a public meeting is I write at the bottom of this, do not respond to me. Cover yourself on that. You're just saying, I'm giving you some information ahead of the meeting so that we're informed on a particular point of view or something you think is relevant. Then at the meeting, when you're in front of the public like this, when you have guests visiting you, which is the other thing, you always are, anyone is allowed to join into this meeting and listen to you and see and hear what you're doing. Then you bring that same thing up. You bring that document or piece of paper or picture or whatever you've got, and you say, you guys know that I brought this up. This is something I wanted to talk about or we were scheduled to talk about. And then you talk about it in public. And that's the way you do it. Any questions about that?
Actually, Marilee, I have a question.
Sure.
So say we find an article, right, and we were going to send it to the group or like the old chart or whatever. Is there another venue that like we could upload stuff ahead of time? Like if we have something, we throw it up there and then not only just us in the email chain see it, but anybody else that might attend the meeting can also see it?
I don't know. I'm new at this. That would probably be a question for our IT department. Josh, have you seen anything like that?
No, that's a great question. On the finance committee, a lot of times what they do is they just ask that when I submit the agenda, that all the items that are also being discussed for that committee that are being distributed to the committee members, that gets uploaded as well along with the agenda. And then it's made available for everyone. So if it's, like I said, if it's something that you'd like discussed at the next meeting, feel free to just forward it to me and then I can distribute it. I can get it attached to, included in an agenda and posted. That's not a problem for me to do.
Yeah, I really like the idea of funneling everything through Josh. That if you want to disseminate information to the rest of the committee, send it to Josh and let him be the vehicle for doing that. I think that's the safest way. I mean, you guys can agree with me or disagree with me on that, but I just think that makes the most sense. So.
Right. Carlton, are you raising your hand and are you allowed?
Yeah, Josh works for another committee that I'm on, and we had some things that we were going to discuss, and in order to facilitate the discussion and get under an official motion, because you can't discuss things unless you're under a motion, I sent draft text to Josh, and then when we got to the point in the meeting where we were ready to have a motion, I was able to move the motion, and he was able to show the text. And we found that to be quite helpful, both for his note taking as well as to generate discussions. Otherwise, he's going to have to talk a lot. He's going to have to take all those notes, write it down. Somebody else has got to remember all the motion's words. So sometimes that's a helpful tool.
Right. I think that's a tool. I don't necessarily think that that's a piece of the open meeting law, but I definitely think as a chair of many committees that is a very helpful tool to have people come prepared, either sending it to Josh ahead of time or having it prepared to email to people the wording that you are going to want for some motion that you know you're going to be making during the meeting. That saves Josh having to write it down verbatim and then make edits to it as everybody changes it and tweaks the wording. So that, I think that simplifies it. Does it simplify it for you, Josh? I would think it's.
Yeah, absolutely. Carlton gave a great example. He actually did that the last CPC meeting, and it helps. It helps because I can actually share the screen. When we actually have in-person meetings, I can also have it printed for everyone, and then that way everybody has it to make notes on if they'd like and take it home and everything. So yeah, that helps a lot.
I think what you shouldn't do for that under the open meeting law is send that intended motion to everyone ahead of time. I just think you should wait. I don't know that that's an absolute violation of it, because the violation is if you are deliberating and talking back and forth and having discussions about the decision you're going to come to. That's the violation. But I think it's much better, much safer to just send it to Josh, have it be available and for use at your meeting, and not circulate it among all of you. You can have, oh, Scott, you saying something?
Yeah, I did want to play devil's advocate here on, I think there's a benefit to getting those motions out ahead of time so people have time to carefully consider them and deliberate, just in their own head, possible amendments, things like that. It reminds me of the early days in the town council where motions would come on the fly and you had Ann Holmberg trying to write them down. But by having the motion in writing included in part of the agenda that would go out, it would allow people more time to consider what was going on. There was more transparency in what was being presented, and nobody was being surprised with a surprise motion that, lo and behold, all of a sudden had 5 people on board instantly, which really didn't lend itself to the credibility of the town council. I think going forward, there's definite benefit to having the material out there ahead of time so we can review it, knowing that we can't discuss it among ourselves until we have our meeting, but at least in fairness to each other, to say, this is what I intend to bring forward, and if you have ways of improving it, please bring those ideas to the meeting.
And I agree with you, Scott. And I think, again, that comes to sending it to Josh. Now, your committee can decide whether each one of you, all 7 of you, can send things to Josh and say, add this to the agenda, or whether your chair is going to be making your agenda. So you send your things to your chair and you say, I would like this on the agenda for the next meeting. But Josh has to, your meeting, part of the open meeting law is that your meeting has to be posted 48 hours before you're going to meet. So that means that everything that you would be, your agenda, as specific as you want to make it, and items that you're going to be discussing on your agenda are all made public 48 hours ahead of time. So all of those things, if you had documents or if you had a motion that you were planning on making or something like that, usually you would send all of that to your chair, to Ed, and send it to him, maybe like, Ed, you'd set a limit on it, but 5 days before the meeting or something like that.
Right.
Have time to look at it and think about it and create your agenda and put that whole packet together and get that to Josh. And then Josh gets that, sends that to our office and we get it posted.
So I have a question regarding that, and I think that's a good way to do things. If I get, a bunch of requests for agenda items, I don't want to unilaterally necessarily make those decisions myself. What I'd like to do is have a discussion with Cleone, the vice chair, and together we'll work out what's appropriate. That's not in violation?
That's not in violation. That's just where I was going just before we went back to Scott's very relevant comment. That 3 of you, you've got 7, so your quorum is 4.
Yeah.
3 of you could be together and actually, if the Better Bean were open, sit at the Better Bean and talk about Charter Review Committee business. I'm not saying that's best practice, but I'm saying that's not against the law. So you can do that as long as you don't have quorum You can
Okay,
Yes, so it's perfectly fine for the chair and the vice chair to create the agenda together, or if one of you is sick, to have one other person who's advising, or, you know, if you're out of town, Ed and Cleone wants to have somebody else to bounce things off of if she's setting the agenda. That's perfectly fine. You can,
okay,
what you cannot do, there's also a thing called a serial violation. So if 3 of you can get together, I mean, just take, I'm trying, there aren't other, so there's 3 of you in a row. There's Ed and Darren and Cleone. So say the 3 of you got together and you discussed something. And Darren says, oh, you know, like, I saw Scott's face when we were talking about this the last time. I'd kind of like to talk with him about it. And while I'm doing it, I think Thomas might have something to say. So I'm going to call the 2 of them and I'm going to talk to the 2 of them about it. And Ed says, well, if you're doing that, I'm going to call Steve. There he is. Okay, that's a
A game of
serial
telephone.
violation. You've done all sorts of deliberating without the public seeing what's going on. So you just can't do that. You just can't. So
Makes
that's
sense.
even kind of tricky to get 3 of you together or something like that, because I don't know, just best to stay away from it. Certainly something like setting an agenda, that isn't probably going to be real deliberation. It's going to be organization to make sure that you're hearing things in order, that you want to take them as you go through your process and say, oh, this thing is coming. We want to talk about this thing in 2 months, but it's kind of early for that or something. And then you tell the person who gave it to you, let's hold off a bit. That's not a violation. You're not deliberating anything there. That clear as mud to everybody?
That's good. Thank you.
Darren, do I see you frowning? Are you okay with everything, Darren? Nod your head if you are. Okay. You're muted. You're muted. I can't hear you. You're muted. You've got to go down to your right-hand corner and
Unmute yourself.
open up your.
Sorry. I'm not used to looking at myself and all these different expressions. And it's like, that's why sometimes I just say, turn it off.
That's
the
okay,
brain
but
fart.
you're clear enough on everything. I was wanting to make sure that.
Yes, I've been listening. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, everything's
All
sounds
right. So,
everything goes to Joshua.
so what else about the open meeting law? The biggest thing is you cannot have a meeting without quorum. So that's 4 of you must be there before you can meet. Josh needs to have your minutes ready. I think 48 hours after the meeting, and the public can request them up to that time. I think they have to be posted 10 days after the meeting, and those aren't your approved minutes. Those are just the raw minutes that Josh has taken during the meeting. And then at the next meeting, you will vote on those minutes. And once they're approved, then they're posted as approved minutes. But up until that time, it's still public information. It was what you said. It's Josh's interpretation of what you've said at the meeting. And of course, that's why we take a vote on the minutes in case he misrepresented you or accidentally quotes somebody and it was another person or something like that needs to be changed on the minutes. That's what you do at your next meeting. Okay?
Okay.
And those minutes are permanent public records. What else? What other questions, Ed, do you think?
No, I think you hit the main points of the open meeting law, which was great because it was a good review for me. The other thing is, I forgot to mention at the beginning of the meeting, is the meeting's recorded. So people need to know that, everything that's said, everything that's discussed is recorded and can be re-listened on YouTube. Or is it YouTube that the stuff gets posted to?
Well,
Josh?
BTV posted on, yeah, do you know that better than I do, Scott? They post on their DVR of BTV.
There's also a YouTube page now.
Okay.
I'm a little behind the times on that, so.
Well, if those are the high points, Marilee, does anyone have any questions for Marilee while she's here with us?
If you have any questions, I'm always available, so never hesitate to ask. It is better with public process, in my estimation. It's always better to ask and be cautious and take a risk that I'm going to tell you, oh, that's the stupidest question I've ever heard, because I never say that. But I'd rather, it'd be much better to call and ask and find out if you have any questions about it before proceeding, because it is a public meeting and there will be public eyes on what you're doing. So
I do
good
have,
luck and thank you.
I do have one more question. I just don't know if it's an open meeting law related question. And I see your husband's still on with us. He might know the answer to this, but it has to do with, as a group, when we discuss something, we make a decision about something. Do we always have to vote, or can we just reach consensus? Like, does everybody agree? Yes. Or do you have to make a motion? Do you have to vote on every single thing you decide?
Scott, you want to take that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think there is, I'd have to go back. I've got an open meeting law book, and I've also got a little plastic cheat sheet. And I'll take an action to go look at that and see. But I do believe that there is a way to say, for the chair to ask and declare we're in consensus on this. But in terms of your recommendations that you will ultimately make to the town council, I think you should always take a vote.
Yeah, right, okay.
Scott.
If we adopt Robert's rules, there is a provision within Robert's rules for unanimous consent for the whoever's presiding over the meeting. And it's simply, the motion comes forward, it gets seconded, and then you can either have discussion, it can come before discussion, or it can come after discussion, where the chair simply says, if there are no objections, we'll pass this with unanimous consent. And if none of us object, then the motion passes.
Okay.
Now, with the virtual meeting, I'm not sure, maybe we need clarification as to whether or not that's permitted, but I know that that's a procedure that is allowed within Robert's rules. And it seems if we don't object, then that's the same as voting aye.
Yeah, Josh, since you've had a lot of experience with other committees, what's your experience with this? I mean, do they vote on every single thing they do, or do they just have discussion and reach consensus?
Only Carlton votes on everything he does. But for the most part, yeah, I mean, unless it's, like Carlton said, unless it's being recommended to the town council, or it's an actual item that's being discussed and needs a vote. I mean, for the most part, you can do that consent, and that's something you can declare. Some of the committees, I mean, some of the committees have a roll call vote to end the meeting, but you can actually declare the meeting over with a unanimous consent. So just things like that. It's kind of up to you in that regard.
Yeah.
I would just recommend doing actual votes for items that are being presented and discussed.
Okay, great.
And the local Esquire that's on this committee probably has the most up-to-date information because he just got through law school. Congratulations.
That's Scott.
Thank you.
Also, Carlton has kind of a rule of thumb, and I don't know if he found it in Robert's rules or wherever, but I think a former town attorney may have told him that all discussion should be based around a motion. So you should be having random talking at your meeting. Everything should be focused on something that you're doing. And that should be listed on the agenda. And you take it up as a motion for it to be on the agenda. So the motion would be, let's take up item J on the agenda. That would be the motion, then the motion would be seconded. You have all your debate and discussion. You let the person who made the motion go first. The person who seconded the motion goes second. If they have any discussion, then it's for all for everybody to discuss. If anybody calls the question in the middle of it, the chair has to take a vote without any further discussion about whether you're going to call the question and end the discussion. You vote to not end the discussion, you keep on discussing. Is that clear as mud?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't believe you discuss, and Scott, help me out here a little bit, but I don't believe that if somebody calls for a question, there's any discussion on it.
There is no discussion.
I couldn't hear what, if somebody
Is there a
calls for what?
discussion when somebody calls the question?
That's correct.
The
That's
chair
correct.
just calls the question.
And you vote.
Need to be seconded.
On the
It doesn't need
question.
to be anything. Somebody just wants the discussion to end. And they say, I call the question. The chair or whoever's running the meeting has to take a vote and say, are we going to, which is basically, are we going to end this discussion?
Right. Even calling the question does require a second, though.
Oh, it does require a second?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So
All right.
if one member calls a question during the discussion and it gets seconded, discussion ends, you have a vote on that.
Right.
If that vote, if you win a majority of the votes, then discussion is over. You go to vote on the motion
Vote on the
itself.
motion.
If the vote on the call of the question fails, you go back to discussion.
Right.
Boy, Scott, I'm so glad you're with us.
Well, that doesn't happen often, but
Yeah, I don't hear that often.
used to happen at town meetings all the time when people didn't want to have something.
Yes.
Right.
So anyway, Scott will see you through. He's
Great.
proficient with the Roberts Rules of Order. So are you, Ed, and everybody else. So
Yeah.
if you haven't picked it up already, you'll pick it up. You're gonna do great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marilee.
Thank you.
Cleone, I'll leave you alone with these men now.
Thank you, Marilee.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Thanks. All right. Was that helpful? Hopefully it was. All right. All right. Next item on the agenda was to establish some committee rules and policies. Some of this we've already briefly chatted about. Number one being the Roberts Rules, which is, sort of a common adopted set of rules to manage meetings. And, I think it makes sense for us to do that. But I will let you know that I like efficiency and I like things to kind of move along. So I don't want to get necessarily caught up in formality, but I want to make sure that we abide by, the process. So Scott, as I said, I'm so glad that you're with us because I'm not that much of an expert with Robert's Rules. So if we kind of veer off track or we need some help from that, hopefully you can be the resource to help guide us on that.
I will do my best. And to that extent, I move we adopt Robert's Rules as our parliamentary procedure.
Thomas seconds.
Any discussion?
Actually, I think for virtual meeting, I need to redo that motion for Joshua.
Yeah.
I, Scott Pitta, move to adopt Robert's Rules as our parliamentary procedure.
And I, Thomas Golden, second the motion.
All right. And no discussion. So I guess we'll take a vote on that.
This would be a good opportunity for unanimous consent.
Let's try it. Do we have unanimous consent? How do we do that? We raise our hand? Do we shake our head?
No, the presiding officer simply says, are there any objections to adopting via unanimous consent?
All right. Are there any objections to adopting Robert's Rules?
Then
All
you
right.
just announce seeing none,
Seeing none,
motion passes.
motion passes. Great. Awesome, Scott. Thank you. All right. We also talked a little bit earlier about all of our emails going through Josh. I think that's an internal process thing for us, and I think that makes a lot of sense. So I guess I would like to make a motion that if we want to communicate as a team, that we send all of our communications through Josh.
I, Scott Pitta, second that motion.
Any discussion? Questions on that? Okay. I think we'll do the consensus again on that. Is that okay? So seeing that we have consensus, we'll adopt that motion. Another item that Carlton had mentioned that the former committee had used was something they call double voting. And what that is as they vote on different items throughout the course of their project, initially what they do is they vote and then they re-vote on those same items at the end. in case anyone's changed their mind or in case something has changed or whatever, it sort of gives a reaffirmation of that first set of votes. Carlton, I see you there. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, the reason that we proposed that is because we didn't have a clear charge other than review the charter. And so we did line by line, and that took a year to do the line by lines. And because we hadn't discussed certain sections, at a point we moved, by the way, you never make a motion, you always, I move. So when we did that, we thought that what happens if discussions later on in the year changed our minds in some way? So that's why we came back and did a reaffirmation vote for each of those changes. And we tracked all the, I sent Ed an example, like I personally tracked all the issues that we did and when the first motion date was, when the second motion date was, and any comments. So we had a record of that very clearly. For you guys, it really depends on how you're going to proceed. Are you going to go from A to Z and then put one thing forward to the town council? Or are you going to try to put things forward as you go? An example. One of the things that's missing in the charter is a recall petition or a section that says how you do a recall. I'm sorry to go into that one, Scott, but you were involved with a lot of that stuff back then. And that's something that could be proposed standalone just to get the charter ready. And that again depends on what the town attorney tells you you can or should or may not want to do. So my other point on that is you need to get some input from the town attorney as to exactly what kinds of recommendations and when and how to make those, because that way there's a clean, clear record of process, and you don't have to necessarily wait till the end of the whole process to put everything up to the town council, and they take another 2 years to think about it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So point taken in terms of the double voting. I guess, part of our decision on whether we should do that or not relates to the overall process that we're going to use. So maybe we postpone that decision, or we can revise it, and we can vote on it now and then revise it later on. But I think it makes sense, to be honest with you. If we take a vote on something now and then 8 months from now, if the same issue comes back up, we may want to re-vote on it. So I'll throw it out there for further discussion if anybody wants to comment on it.
What would be the advantage of voting on it now?
I guess it depends on, again, how our process goes. If we decide to sort of adopt what the former committee, start with the former committee's recommendations and instead of starting like they did when they went line by line through the charter, if we just take their recommendations and start reviewing their recommendations, we're going to vote on those each, one by one. We're going to look at them. We'll determine if we still think they make sense, and then we'll vote on them. But it's going to be in probably a serial fashion. So if we vote on the first one, and then we move on, later on when we actually make our presentation to the town council, are we going to want to re-look at it and re-vote on it again, just to make sure that we're all thinking the same way. Scott? You're on mute.
There we go. First thing, procedurally, because you asked me to keep you in line. Right now we're having a discussion, but there is no motion out there. So we're kind of off the agenda at this point. And
yeah.
So
well, we're discussing an agenda item though, which was double voting.
Yeah. But I can, to Marilee's point earlier about staying on the agenda and staying within the open meeting law for that. I just want to bring that up, but I think this is definitely something that we don't have anything coming up that we're going to be reviewing tonight. So this could be something we could vote on next meeting, or, but I agree with you, there's a benefit to it. You know, we're
Okay.
going to be making a lot of recommendations for changes to the charter, which is a very big deal. It's the constitution of the town.
Right. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so let's see. I think it makes sense to table it for now, come back and revisit it under our rules and policies.
Please don't table things. There's a reason. If you table it and you don't pick it off the table within 3 months, it's done. You can't do anything about it.
Okay, then I used the wrong
I
term.
recommend that you suggest to bring it up in the next meeting, but tabling has some serious consequences in terms of when you can bring it back up.
Okay, thank you, Carlton, for that clarification. So I move that we postpone further discussion on the double voting till a future meeting.
I, Thomas Golden, second that.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, then through consensus, then I guess we will, I'm struggling with what I need to say here.
Discussion later.
Through consensus, we agree that we will approve that motion and move forward. Okay. All right, the other, again, I don't know if I want to make a motion or this is just discussion. Scott, if I want to bring up another item for a rule or a policy, do I have to make a motion to discuss it?
Well, it would be, a motion to approve whatever rule it is that you're looking to bring forward, get seconded, then we talk about it.
Okay, so I'd like to bring a motion to consider including public comment in our meetings.
I, Scott Pitta, second that motion.
Okay, any discussion?
Well, as the moving party, Ed, you get first crack at discussion.
Okay, as I think Carlton already alluded to, and it seems to be common practice, throughout Bridgewater, is that most boards and committees allow at least one opportunity for the citizens to comment during the meetings. Some allow it twice, at the beginning and at the end, or some just at the beginning or at the end. So I think what I'd like to do with you is to have a discussion about, do we just want to give one opportunity, or do we want to have two opportunities and the rationale for each?
Is that per meeting or the beginning or the end of the process of the review?
Per meeting.
Per meeting.
So it would be a standing agenda item every meeting. Like the town council, for example, allows citizens comment at the beginning of their meetings and at the end of their meetings.
Does look like we have
an anonymous person here.
Yeah, Josh will take care of that, right, Josh?
Diego.
Scott?
Yes, so the town council uses at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting, any member of the town of Bridgewater can come forward and speak for 3 minutes on any agenda item. And it might be beneficial and expedite this process if we simply adopt the same rules and procedures.
Okay.
And just so I understand, Scott, you're suggesting that we have public comment at the beginning and the end?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure.
Yes, the The procedure would be after the initial formalities to enter into the meeting, then there's an open forum for the public to come forward, and they would have 3 minutes to speak about whatever it is that they want to address. We always preferred that they talk about an agenda item. Sometimes it wasn't an agenda item, but
This is a message from Anonymous.
Okay, can
it
we-
wasn't relevant
Other
to.
crimes need to be held accountable just like the rest.
Thank you, Josh.
No problem.
And it wasn't, sometimes it wasn't relevant to what was on the agenda, but it was relevant to the town of Bridgewater. And then there were some people that would stay through the entire meeting, and then what we discussed in the meeting would then have, they would have comments on what happened during that meeting.
So if I agree with that, you say what, Cleone Mainville second that motion? Or,
I don't, so Ed has the main motion. I think I'll offer that as an amendment. I move that we adopt the town council's public comment rules and procedures. And then, Cleone, if you agree, then you would second the amendment.
so I, Cleone Mainville, second that amendment.
Mhm. So then, Ed, you treat this sort of like a new motion, and
Right. So everyone understand what the motion is, and are there any questions on the motion? Okay, if not, why don't we do a vote on this one?
okay.
Josh?
All right, Ed,
Yes.
Cleone,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Scott, for that.
And just procedurally, that brings us back to your main motion, which would then require a vote. So we amended the motion that you made.
Okay, my motion was to have public comment as
Yes.
part of our agenda. Your amendment said we're going to do it via the town council's rules.
Yes.
So now, so we voted for the amendment, now we got to vote for the main motion. Was the main motion seconded by
Yeah.
anyone?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's do a vote on that one too, Josh, please.
Just a moment, just trying to capture everything here.
Is there a cheat sheet for all this kind of lingo? There
Yeah,
is?
Scott has it.
Yes, I've got it somewhere, and it's about that thick.
At a glance.
It becomes second nature once you start doing it, but it is awkward at first.
Yeah.
All right, let me do the vote for the motion here. Ed,
Yes.
okay, Cleone,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, so my question now is, do we have any other suggestions for committee rules or policies at this point? We've talked about the public comment. We've talked about Robert's rules. We've talked about emails all going through Josh. And we talked about double voting, which we're going to reconsider at a later time. Is there any other potential rules or policies that we want to adopt now? We can always update it going forward. Scott?
Yes, I move we adopt the 2 reading rule for all proposed amendments to the charter. And in discussion, I'll explain what that is if I get a second.
I, Thomas Golden, second.
Okay, discussion?
So by the 2 reading rule, again, this comes from the town council, but it is it's a rule that requires any amendment that we propose to be read in the first meeting and then it must be read in a second meeting, and that second meeting can't be less than 7 days from the first reading. And this would allow the public, sorry, we've got lots of cooking noise in the background. It would allow the public more opportunity to see the proposed amendments and to respond to us and to give us their thoughts and comments. You know, everybody's busy, essentially, is what it is. And we want to be as open as possible when we're proposing amendments to this charter.
So are you saying before we actually take a vote on something,
Correct.
you're saying we discuss it and we prepare it to a point where it's ready for vote,
Correct.
but we don't vote on it until we post it, and you said it has to be out for a minimum of 7 days?
Yes. So we would have one meeting. Let's say I propose a recall provision for the charter, just because that we had talked about that earlier, or Carlton had mentioned that earlier. I propose a recall provision, and I submit all of the documents to Joshua, and it's out there on the agenda. Everybody can see it. We read it into the record. We can have the motion to bring it up, go into discussion, and then there's a motion to postpone. Sorry, I've got chaos going on with my teenager. Being recorded. So, I'm trying to remember where I was now. It's basically just a way of slowing down the process a little bit. You know, it slows it down 7 days to allow people to see what's going on. Does that make sense?
So, right when you said slowing down the process, the hair on the back of my neck went up.
Yeah.
I guess for me, it's a balance. It's a balance between getting things done quickly and efficiently,
Yeah.
versus you know, elongating the process to ensure that we have the right level of public input. So if we can achieve the right balance, I'm all for it. But you know,
Yeah. And if I may, as I'm thinking this through, whether we do it here or once these proposals come from us and go to the town council, they will get 2 readings there as well. So I'm really okay either way. But I would like to hear from the rest of the committee.
Can I just talk?
yeah, go ahead, Cleone.
Okay. Is it something that we can say yes to now? So my background is also, I'm a social worker, so I always believe in getting the public input. And so I like that idea about giving folks some time to digest it. However, as we go along and we find that no one's really interested in our committee or engaging in any kind of providing any input, can we then revisit it and say this is simply just slowing us down and not giving us the return that we're looking for?
I would say the exact opposite of that. I would say we press forward as we are, and then if we find that there is public that wants to show an interest and provide comment, then we can go back and actually slow it down.
Okay. I know Carlton had sent me a spreadsheet that showed every single meeting that they had and over a full year. And out of all the meetings they had, I think they had 2 times where the public showed up at the meetings. So, I mean, you know, but that may be different here, but I guess it doesn't mean we have to, you know, close things up either. Boy, Carlton, you look like a ghost in the dark closet there.
It's the white beard, I'm sorry.
So, so we have, yeah.
May I make a comment?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead, Darren.
I don't think waiting for public, waiting for anything really helps us, because we can always go back and revisit something, or open up something again for discussion. So if we wait, for other opinions, it'll be hard to get anything done. And plus, we're only making recommendations anyway. So even if we make a recommendation, it doesn't mean that it's going to be anything that's going to happen. But I think waiting, is not an efficient way when we can always go back later and discuss it, further.
Scott?
I appreciate the discussion. That's exactly what I was hoping to bring out in that discussion. Seeing the comments, with the chair's permission, I'll withdraw the motion. Was it Tom? Did you second?
I think I seconded, yeah.
Okay, if you're willing to withdraw the second, I'll withdraw the motion.
second.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate the comments.
All right, great. That was a good discussion. Thank you. So the 2 reading rule for now, end of discussion on that. Thank you for that, Scott. Anyone else have any suggestions? Cleone.
I had more of a question. So in the event that we do get comments from the public, in the other committees, we don't usually respond. The public says something and it just kind of goes out there. Is there a rule where we would respond to the public?
I think we could come up with a rule. I don't think that there's one that exists already that says we have to, but I tend to like that idea, actually, because I think citizens comment and then they don't hear anything. It's like, what's the purpose in commenting then? It seems like nobody cares that I'm commenting, And we just have to come up with a vehicle for how do we respond, I guess. And that requires separate tracking and follow through.
Well, I believe very strongly in, if we're going to go through all these ways to get the public involved, we should give them the respect to respond, whether it be at a certain time period or the next meeting or something.
Are you talking specifically when somebody asks a question, say during public comment?
Yes, that's what I was referring to.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Steve, you're shaking your head. You agree with that?
I totally agree. Yeah, I think we should have a time where we can respond to public comment. They have 3 minutes, and we should be able to respond to that if we so choose.
Okay. How about you, Darren?
Yes, I agree. I would agree with that.
Thomas?
I agree.
Scott?
I'll throw out the devil's advocate argument and I don't see it so much in this committee being an issue, but in the town council, where very early on, this procedure was attempted to use to subvert the agenda, where, let's say I have somebody that I know come into the public comment and make a comment about something, and then there in the meeting, it would turn into a discussion. And then I think it was within the first month of the town council, one of the council members attempted to make a motion based on the citizen's comment that was not on the agenda. And it was a way of subverting the agenda process and the notice to the public that an item was going to come up. So that's really where the danger in having that comment during the process. So it may be a better idea to, thank them for the comment and maybe have one of us volunteer at the time to follow up with them.
That was the idea, not to necessarily respond in the meeting, but either at a future date or the next meeting. But yes, I wouldn't want the back and forth discussion during that meeting.
Perfect.
Okay. Can I ask Carlton a question? I see you there, Carlton. So I don't know if you heard me earlier about your spreadsheet only having two citizens attend your meetings. Did you get any sort of inquiries, letters, emails, anything from the public asking for feedback or comments, questions?
Anything we have and received was either recorded in the minutes and their name and comments recorded in the minutes, or in the case of some kind of submission, that is also included as an appendix in the report that we put out. I think the only time you wouldn't respond at this level is if you are holding an official public hearing. Hearings are for hearing. Comments come later, after, etc. The town council is right now dealing with this same issue because people come and they make a statement, they have something, that question that they ask in the citizens comment question period. Nobody ever gets back to them. And they're starting to understand that that's probably not the best policy. They're trying to work a way to do that. So my suggestion is that you would allow public comments, and you can do it when you've already said before and after. I'm thinking a little bit on the fly, but I think you have to be careful that you don't go off the deep end when you respond. So I think that having someone that will get back to them, or you will write, again, you have to be careful. If it's an official memo that goes out or message that goes out to somebody, then it's public record and you're on record for whatever it is. So I think you should just acknowledge the receipt, and you potentially could have some small discussion with them. There's nothing against, except in town council, council cannot respond, but you set it up such that you might have a discussion with them. Sometimes discussions with the public can be very informative. But if it gets out of hand, the chair has the authority to simply say, this is over. This discussion's ended. So that's my input. I think it needs to be a little bit more flexible.
Thank you, Carlton. That's good wisdom. So I know that the next town council meeting, which is the 16th, this is actually going to be on their agenda again. And I think Mike Dutton is proposing a process for how to respond to citizens' comments. I wonder if we should just wait and kind of see what the council is going to do about it, and then either consider using their process, or maybe modifying their process, or we could come up with our own process. But I guess I don't feel comfortable right now that we have an answer to how to do it. So could I make a motion to reconsider this particular item at a future meeting?
I think it was just a discussion, wasn't it? Or did Cleone move to do something to make this a motion?
I think maybe it was just a.
And I think you've heard the discussion, and you can actually say to something in effect, we'll take this up at a future meeting. I don't think you need a motion for that.
Okay, see, this is the kind of like, when do you and when don't you? It's almost like you need a Robert's Rules traffic cop in the room.
That you got a lawyer.
Yeah, one, I guess.
Next best thing.
Well, there's no motion on the floor, so if there's no motion and no second, then the chair can just move right along.
Okay.
You have a lot of power.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so that unless there's any other discussion on our rules and policies, then I think we've ended that agenda item for now. Okay? All right, how are we doing on time here? We have, I thought there was a time on this. Oh, 8:20, 8:16, something like that. Let's get in and talk a little bit about some initial planning for our tasks. I don't think we have enough time to do it tonight, but I think we can maybe talk a little bit about what we want to do, maybe our scope, how we want to address our scope. I wanted to take maybe 3 minutes just to give you a little bit of background on where we are today and why we're here. So for those of you that weren't aware of what was going on back in 2007, when we were under our old form of government, we had open town meeting with a board of selectmen, with a town administrator. And the open town meeting basically was our legislative branch. The board of selectmen and the town administrator shared the executive responsibility. A citizen made a recommendation to the board of selectmen to form a study group that was basically going to look at all aspects of town government and come back and make recommendations. So I think it was in the fall of 2007, town meeting approved forming a town government study committee, which was a 7-person committee, which I was on. And we began to meet in March of 2008. And we looked at every aspect of town government. We looked at the form of government. We looked at the structure of our government. You know, we looked at everything. And it basically took us a year to come back with a set of recommendations. And the recommendation was to change the form of government to town council, strong town manager, which the citizens approved at a town meeting in June of 2009. And it was at that point then that we started to write the charter. None of us had any experience in writing charters, so we went to a lot of towns that had already written charters. We got a lot of experts to help us, and we basically wrote the charter that was presented with the charter that we're using right now, that was presented and voted on by town meeting in December of 2009. From there, they decided to implement the charter through a special act of the legislature. So it was sent up to the state legislature in January of 2009. It took 3 months for them to get it back, and was on the ballot in April of 2010. So that was the time when it was actually voted on and passed in April of 2010. The charter, as you know, required a 9-member town council, 7 district councilors and 2 at large. Those councilors were voted in through a special town meeting, I believe, in August or September of that year, right after the charter was voted in April. So the council was actually formed in September of 2010, but they didn't take office until January of 2011. So for the 3 months in the fall of that year, they just started to meet as a group informally. They started to come up with their policies, how they were going to, run their meetings, et cetera. And then in January, they officially took office. So we've been under this form of government now officially since January of 2011, so 9 years. And looking back, there's been a lot of changes. There's been a lot of good things that have happened. There's been a lot of learning that we've went through. One of them that you've already heard about is the recall. We never put a recall provision in the charter. We never thought we would need one. Well, what happened? We had a major issue with several of our town councilors, and there was a recall that was done, and we had to use an old recall provision from way back in the 60s, whenever it was put in. So the charter has served us well over the last 9 years, but it's far from perfect. And there's a lot of things that need to change. And I think Carlton and Dennis Gallagher and the rest of the prior group that met over the past 5 years has done a lot of work that I think, my own personal view, I don't think we need to go back and start from scratch and repeat what they did. I think what we should do is start where they ended up, go back and revisit every recommendation that they made and see if we agree with those recommendations. We can also take input. Maybe there's some things they didn't consider that are new things that we want to look at. So I wanted to sort of preface the whole scoping issue or subject of discussion here with a little bit of the history of where we are, why we're here today, and begin to think about how we want to attack this. Because ideally, we should be able to do this in a year or less than a year. Because what's going to happen is we're going to make recommendations to the town council. At that point, it's sort of out of our hands. And then the council will then sort of pick it apart, and they may change our recommendations like last time. They sent it down to the Rules and Procedure Committee. They actually, I think they took 2 years, almost 2 years within the Rules and Procedure Committee to further refine the recommendations and then come up with what they felt they wanted to send to the state legislature. Part of the issue too was how it was all packaged. I'm sure you've heard about that. It was all or nothing. And I think one of the things that we can do as a committee, maybe a little bit better this go around, is explore the different options for how we're going to present this to the public and educate the council on what those options might be. I think we've got a lot of resources that we can use at the state level and other organizations, particularly other towns that have gone through this that maybe haven't been connected with, and we can find out how they did it and learn from them as well. So to me, we have two things we need to do. We really have to look at all the recommendations and sort of come up with our proposals, but then we also need to look at how is it going to be presented to the public? What's the mechanism for ensuring that we can get something passed? It can't be all or nothing, because if that happens again, it'll fail. We have to be able to present something that gives the citizens options to choose from at the ballot. So that's sort of my introduction to the scoping process. I'd be interested in hearing any other comments or feelings that any of you guys have before we delve into this. Cleone, you're on mute. There you go.
I'm going to apologize. There's some futzing around behind me from my family. My question would be, what's the high level goal that we're looking to achieve? It seems like in the beginning, it was around, clarifying some areas and making sure that things were, the language was strong enough and so forth. In this second phase, are we still looking to achieve those outcomes, or are we also looking to kind of determine the efficiency of how our local government is running, and maybe certain things pertaining to the public? So I guess I'm looking for the high level goal, the high level questions that the charters should be addressing.
So our charge is basically to review the charter. This is every 6 years, charter calls for a review. And we're supposed to review it and make recommendations for any potential changes or additions to. I believe that we also have the option, if we want to, we could go back and make a recommendation to change the form of government again, potentially. If we want to go that far, we could do that.
I guess my question is, I understand we're reviewing the charter, but for what purpose? To see if we need our government to work more efficiently, to see if our rules and our guidelines are clear. I get what is the purpose of the review?
It's a good question. I mean, my view is it's to improve the charter. It's to, we have at least one loophole we know in the term limit language right now that is being exploited by one of our ex-town councilors. There are a lot of grammatical things. It just needs to be cleaned up and clarified. There's some legalese that it needs to be looked at. It's really just overall, Cleone, I think it's to look at opportunities to improve the charter and to update it based on where we are today. At this point in time, 9 years after the charter was implemented, what has changed since back in 2010 that now we want to reflect in the charter that we've learned? Maybe some things have worked well, some things haven't worked well, whatever. I mean, our charter is pretty open at this point. It's really up to us to be as narrow on the scope or as wide on the scope as we want. But keeping in mind that this isn't going to go on for years. It's got to be something, I think, that we, ideally, I would like to see that we could hopefully get something before the citizens by next April, which would mean, in a best case scenario, again, we don't know what the council is going to do with it. We can only give it to the council, and then whatever the council does with it, that's going to affect the time frame. As Carlton mentioned earlier, though, you can also do it piecemeal. We could make a recommendation next month, for example, to say, we feel that the recall provision is where it needs to be based on the prior committee's formulation of that. We'd like to see that move forward right away. Yep, Darren.
Yeah, I like that idea of piecemeal, because as you mentioned before, you said something about it was all or nothing. I think we might be more effective, might be helpful if we prioritize, and like we see, we have a couple of things that these are the things that we want to talk about and make a recommendation on, but I don't know is, okay, let's say there are one or two things that we have a recommendation that we want to make. What's that process? How long does it take to get it to the council or to get, a response from them on our recommendation? And because if we can, let's say, prioritize and make recommendations piecemeal as Carlton may have recommended, maybe within a year we may be able to have, several items that have already been discussed and have good recommendations that the council may accept.
Okay. All right. Cleone, I'm not sure I answered your question adequately. I'm sorry if I didn't, but again, our charge is pretty much what we want to make it to be at this point.
So with that in mind and wearing the hat, like I said, always thinking about, who we are in service to, I almost feel that there needs to be some way for us to tap into the residents and get feedback about what isn't working based on how the charter has been implemented to date, since it seems that it's very broad, right? We don't really have that direction, and we are in service to the folks. Is that something that, I don't know about protocol, it's just how I'm thinking, is that something that can be done to find out from those, like, what isn't working? Same way how we would be talking to the different departments, Yeah.
Scott?
Thank you. To that extent, Cleone, each of us are free to go outside of the committee without violating any open meeting law. We can go to town council members, we can go to the town manager. If you really want to know what's working and not working, I would say talking to the town manager's assistant and to Ann Holmberg, who's really the full-time running the show over at the town council, would be a good resource to go to, as well as, the town council members are there, they're dealing with it every single day. But there's nothing stopping each of us from going out and speaking with them directly.
Yeah.
If you want to reach out to citizens on Facebook, that you're within your rights to do that, as long as we are not having a discussion amongst ourselves on a Facebook post or a chat or anything like that. We're fine.
That's good to know. Thank you.
So one of the things that we did way back when we first started this, before we had the charter, was we came up with a questionnaire and we interviewed all the department heads. We interviewed key people in town. I have all that information from way back. because we, at the same thing, we wanted to understand what was on people's minds, you know, what was working well, what wasn't working well. So the question is whether we want to do something formally as a committee and maybe invite different people to come in to our meetings and use the same questionnaire, or whether we want to do it sort of, you know, more loosely and individually. I mean, as far as department heads, there's probably, I don't know what, maybe 6, 7, 8 department heads. If we dedicated a couple of meetings just to doing interviews of department heads, we could do that probably in 2 or 3 meetings. Just invite them and give them a certain time slot and ask them questions and, you know, let them just talk, see what's on their minds. We could do that. You know, another, you know, there were, in addition to the basic changes that were recommended by the former committee, the grammatical changes, you know, all those kinds of things that make sense. They need to be done to clarify and clean up the document. There were some hot issues. You know, one was the term limits. One was the appointed versus elected town clerk. One was the stipends for the town councilors. So, you know, maybe there's some way we can get those, the bulk of the necessary changes in, you know, and maybe that's 80 to 85% of all the stuff that needs to get in. There's no controversy over that stuff. But then the hot button issues, we strategize a little bit more about those and how do we, you know, propose implementing those.
I like that process, because as you're going through and, you know, figuring out those kind of concrete things, you know, what's not clear or whatever, it gives us all an opportunity to get familiar with the charter as it was, as it's recommended, and then you can get into those more debatable changes as you propose.
Okay.
Where do we go from here?
I'm thinking. Anyone have any suggestions? I mean, we could. Here are some potential options. I mean, we do exactly what the last committee did, which was basically start with the current charter, and we go line by line. And basically, I'm not saying we ignore what they did, but we do our own thing, and then maybe at some point we candle it up to what they did, see if there's any, you know, commonality or consistency between the two. That's one option. Another option is we start with what they did. Since they took all the time and effort in 1 year doing what they did, we start with the charter that they recommended with the changes. And we have a I think one of the ones I sent, one of the files I sent out to you was the marked up version of their charter. So it shows you what they recommend for changes. So in that sense, we can kind of get familiar with the charter. We can see what the current language is, but then we can see what their recommended changes are. And you can kind of balance the two out. Some we make, some, hopefully most of them we agree with, but maybe there are some we don't agree with. So that's sort of the option 2. I guess another option, I'm sorry, Thomas.
So I would kind of, in my opinion at least, would be to take what they did as step A. Step 2 or step B would be maybe do some kind of solicitation from the general public, right? Either do some type of either social media or what have you, and say, does anybody have any opinions outside of the actual people that work in the town, people that live in the town that are affected by it? And then step C would be to kind of balance those two and see what seems to be most prevalent, or if there's any common themes between the two, rather than spending time redoing what the last charter did and doing redundant work for in a limited time frame. It's not like we have 10 years to do this.
Right. Keep in mind that the former group did what they did back in 2014. So that was 6 years ago. And obviously a lot of the stuff is still valid, but if we took a pulse of our government as of today in 2020, does it look the same as it looked 6 years ago? Probably not. So using what they did as a baseline, but then reaching out to people in the community, people in government to sort of get a sense of what's important to them. And then sort of doing the comparison to see if what the hot button issues today, are they being cared for in what the former committee did, or do we need to add them to it? Is that basically what you were saying, Thomas?
More or less.
Anyone else? Well, let me ask this. Does anyone have a feeling one way or another whether we should be looking at changing the form of government?
I'm still learning about that. I don't have enough information about that to speak on that tonight.
Okay. Scott?
Having grown up here in Bridgewater and seen the changes, when I was born here, there were more cows than people. And I feel very strongly the charter form of government is the way we need to continue to move forward. It's just, town meeting is great when you've got a small community, but we're much larger now, and this really is the way to go forward. We got ourselves in a lot of trouble with town meeting. That's just my personal opinion. I've seen the charter work. It's got some problems, but it's getting better, and it'll continue to get better every time we go through this, or the next committee goes through this. So, just my thoughts.
Darren?
Yeah, is there a way we can prioritize? I'm the type of person, when I work, there's usually a lot of things I need to work on, so I have to prioritize, and I'm the type of person I usually attack the most difficult, but then at the same time, while I'm working on something difficult, I might work on something that is easy to address, so that maybe I'm getting more stuff done, or I can get more things done at the same, in a shorter period of time by, at least looking at the difficult, but at the same time, addressing what's easy to address. So as you mentioned about the term limits, that might be something that's difficult to address, but then there may be other things that are simple things that we can, discuss and be working on multiple things, but at the same time trying to prioritize.
Okay. Yeah, good point. Absolutely. Steve, I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, I agree with Darren. I think you doing the low-hanging fruit is easy. It'll get us into the swing of it, so we kind of understand how the process is. And so if we use the previous recommendations of like the grammatical stuff, and we push that forward to the councilmen and get that out of the way, we understand the process behind it. We can vote and do all that, but then go and tackle something that's a little more debatable.
Okay. Yeah.
But I do think that we should, push forward and get rid of the low-hanging fruit, so we're not just constantly worrying about some of that other stuff that took them so long to go through.
Okay. So I guess the reason I asked the question about, is there anyone here thinks that we should be looking at changing the form of government? Because if collectively we feel that we should be looking at that, then that's a dramatic undertaking, and it's sort of a big shift from what the former group did. Scott, you commented on it. I have my own feelings. I think we're in a much better place now than we were 10 years ago in terms of efficiency and productivity and such. But one thing that might be helpful For the rest of you, if you're feeling like you're not sure, then maybe I could send you the final recommendations that the town voted on in December of 2008 that basically got us to where we are today. Reading through that, you would see why people decided to change the form of government.
Is that government review committee
The Town
document?
Government Study Committee, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I would like that.
Okay, I'll send that to to Josh, and then Josh can send it out and you guys can look at it. It just gives you good background that talks about what wasn't working well and why we changed what we did. And, you know, I had a recent discussion with Mike Dutton because I wanted to get his feeling about, you know, Mike, you've been on the job now, I think 8 years. How do you think we're doing as a town in terms of this form of government? Do you think, you know, we made a good decision? He said, yeah, I think we did. But I said, how do we measure that? Do we have any data that actually shows that, you know, we've improved? And he said, no, not really. No, you know, maybe, you know. So he was interested in actually doing some sort of a study to look at, you know, ways to sort of provide data and analyze and prove that the decision that we made 10 years ago was the right decision for the town. But, you know, that's not something we're going to do. But the questions are being asked anyways. Okay, so yeah, Scott.
If you'll permit me, I do have some data right off the top of my head. When the town council came in, we were $750,000 in debt on the verge of receivership. By the end of my second term on the town council, we had over $2.2 million in free cash reserves and continued to grow that free cash reserves over the years. And just this past year during the budget cycle, the town council dipped into that so that they could fully fund the school system for the amount the school system requested. So that's one positive.
Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. I guess at this point, I'm struggling with making a motion that we not focus on changing the government. But I don't want to, if people are feeling uncomfortable with making that decision right now, then I'll make the motion at a later date. I guess that's kind of the way I'm feeling right now. So maybe I'll hold off on that. I'll send that recommendation file out. You guys can look at it. And maybe the next meeting, we can have this discussion again, if that's fair enough. I see some heads nodding. Yeah. Okay. We have talked about a lot of stuff tonight. I mean, I'm very, what's the word I'm looking for? I want to make sure that we keep the meetings to 2 hours. I don't want to go over 2 hours. So we've got 15 minutes left. And at this point, I don't think we need to talk any more about scoping. And I think that's going to be the bulk of our next meeting, is we're going to dive in and talk about, you know, our plan. We got to end our next meeting with sort of a proposed plan for what we're going to do and our attack and timeline. So let's talk a little bit about scheduling. I know we wanted to try and base our schedule of meetings around Josh's availability. And the last time he and I talked, the first and I think third Wednesdays of the month were best for him. Is that correct, Josh?
Let me just triple check here.
First and third?
Yep. Yeah, because the only other committee that I'm on that meets on Wednesdays is the community preservation there on the fourth Wednesday.
Okay. So if we want to stick to sort of that schedule, we're kind of looking at the calendar here. We're kind of mixed up right now. We're actually on the second Wednesday right now. So if we want to go to the first and third, that means we would actually meet again next Wednesday. And then then we'd skip, and then we'd meet on July 1st. I don't want to overwhelm anyone with meetings, but I'm just wondering if maybe this one time to get on an active regular schedule, we might have to do a meeting next Wednesday as well. Is that okay, or is that pushing it with people?
I'm not available next Wednesday, unfortunately.
Okay. Steve, how are you feeling about it?
I'm good with that. I travel a lot, so once we start doing in-person meetings, I might be calling in or viewing it via webcast, but I can make that happen.
Okay. Darren?
Yeah, I like the Zoom meetings because it eliminates the travel. And then also, I have a second home, so I may be in Vegas or something. So what I like about the Zoom meetings is that it doesn't matter where you are, you don't have to travel, so you can attend. So the attendance, I think, would be better. But it would also be good if, let's say, once every couple of months that we had an in-person meeting. But I like the Zoom meetings because it eliminates the travel and it gives people a little bit more flexibility. But it would be nice to have in-person meetings, periodically. But
Okay.
I think these Zoom meetings would be more effective because people wouldn't have to travel.
Okay. But yeah, you okay with next Wednesday?
I'm okay. That's fine. But I'm pretty flexible.
Thomas, how about you?
I could do next Wednesday.
Okay. I mean, I'd like to try and accommodate Cleone, if we can.
Could I make one pitch though, Ed? I mean, given that there's a lot of background material, it might behoove us to, instead of having a meeting, skip next Wednesday and do the meeting on the 1st, but have read all, I put it up 760 something pages of material.
Sorry.
It's good material to have. It just, you might, use the time in lieu of a meeting to.
Well, the thing is, if we don't meet today's the 10th. If we don't meet next Wednesday, then basically we're going to meet on the 1st. We're going to wait 3 weeks. We're not going to meet again until 3 weeks from tonight. I mean,
is it a requirement to have meetings more frequently?
No, it isn't. It isn't. I just, I didn't want to sort of come out of the gate and then.
Slow. Yeah, I got you.
But I don't want to overwhelm anybody either. I mean, Cleone, would another day next week work for you? Or is it just Wednesday's bad?
Let me look. It's just that day I know is bad because I have a presentation that I need to do.
Okay.
But the rest of the week, you said next week, correct?
Yeah, I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know if Josh is available either. So, I mean, if we could find another day next week, or maybe even like, instead of waiting 3 weeks, but not doing next week, what if we did the 19th or the 22nd? I don't want to wait 3 weeks. I think we should have at least one more meeting before the 1st.
So I'm available the 16th. And I'm available the 22nd.
Well, all right, let me ask Josh.
I can't do the 22nd. Yeah, I have the finance committee.
Say that again.
I have the finance committee on the 22nd.
Okay. How about the 18th or the 19th?
Ooh, to Fridays.
Yeah, okay, I'll go to Friday.
Ed, if I may.
Go ahead.
Instead of doing back-to-back meetings this week and next week, if we skip next week and do the 24th and the 1st, that would meet Tom's request to have more time to digest the material. And it still meets your goal of, moving along and accomplishing and then getting back on schedule.
Perfect.
I like it.
Perfect. Great. Everybody,
I can't do the 24th.
you can't?
I can't, but I think Anne said that she could possibly stand in for me if I can't make it. So with the current circumstances, I'm sure she wouldn't mind just taking over for that day.
Okay,
I don't speak for her. I would like to just confirm with her, but she did say that she'd be willing to step in if I couldn't make it to the meetings.
okay. So why don't we plan, I like your idea, Scott. Is everybody on board with that? Heads shaking, yep. Okay, so why don't we tentatively plan the 24th? That's contingent on Ann's ability to back up Josh. And if she can't, then we either just don't meet again, or, I mean, is the 25th possibly for you, Josh? Is Thursday the 25th?
I'll make it work.
You'll make what work?
The 25th.
Can everyone else do the 25th if the 24th is bad? No, okay. All right, well, we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope that the 24th works. Otherwise, we'll figure something out.
Okay.
The 25th, as long as I'm done by 8 o'clock, I'm free in the 25th. I just have a meeting at 8 o'clock, 8 to 9.
Oh, okay. Does anybody have a problem starting earlier? Like starting at 6 to 8?
No
Thumbs
problem.
up.
I might be a little late on that one.
Josh?
Yeah, I can do that.
Steve, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. Carlton?
Ed, you listed me on the next meeting that I or someone would be invited and lessons learned. If that's the expectation, then I have the same meeting that Josh has on that Wednesday.
Okay, I was going to ask you at the end, but I'll ask you now. So you've shared some information tonight. If we invite you back, you'll have additional new information to share other than what you've said tonight?
Depends on what you want to hear.
Okay, I mean, I don't want to waste your time, but if you have other stuff to provide to us, then we definitely want to hear it. So,
I think the main stuff I've done is in your hands, the stuff I sent out to you. You've talked about rules. The only thing I would suggest is don't forget to look at what the town council put up to the state in terms of their revisions. Because you've got that, they changed a lot of ours, they accepted some of them. You know, the ones they accepted right up front, you know, that's a no-brainer type thing, but there's a lot of things that they changed. And there's a lot of places where they updated Mass General Law citations and removed text out of our recommendations. So you've got really 3 documents you may be looking at. And the last piece is that what I would say at the next meeting, I'll say it now, I highly recommend that you have the town attorney come in and explain the options the town has for modifying the town charter. I'm sure Scott could help you with that, but I think the town attorney is important that you guys hear from him as to what, I think there's 3 potential options for modifying the town charter. And I think you guys need to work forward based on potentially 1 or 2 of those. I hear some of them may, in fact, include not even having to go to the state for changes.
right, okay.
Thank
All right, so getting back to the meeting, we'll schedule the 24th tentatively. If that doesn't work, then we'll go to the 25th with a 6 o'clock start time. And then from then on, we're going to meet every Wednesday, the first and third Wednesday of the month. Okay?
At
Okay.
1900.
What's 1900?
7 o'clock. All right, do we need a vote on that? I think we're good. All right, any other closing comments, questions?
Thanks for letting me sit in.
I'm sorry?
Thanks for letting me sit in.
Oh, thank you, Carlton. We appreciate it very much. And thank your wife as well.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
Joshua, you sent us a letter from someone. Was that something that we were going to be discussing at some point?
I can fill you in on that. So David Moore, that letter,
Yes.
I actually talked with him he has a couple of concerns about, if you read the letter, neither one of those is in the charter. Those are administrative code issues. So I told him to work with his 3 town councilors, because they're the ones that are responsible for the administrative code. And so Dennis, Matt Rushton, and Fred Chase are now working directly with Dave. So I sort of pushed that over to them where it belongs.
Okay, thank you.
It was more of an FYI, I guess, for you guys.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I do have one quick thing. So Bridgewater resident who happens to be on the trustee for the library did tell me that she would like to speak to our group at some point, just FYI for everybody.
Okay.
She and the trustees have some concerns with the wording related to the library in the town charter.
Oh, okay. Great. Can you give her my email address?
Yeah, I told her once we assigned a chair, I'd get her some contact info.
Have her reach out to me and we'll get her to a schedule. Great. I'll reach out to Mr. Karolchik and find out, what happened to him tonight. But I know that we all have busy lives we're living, but I mean, we need to, once we're committed here, we need to try and commit as much as we can. Things are going to come up, I understand. The only thing I would ask is if you know you're not going to make it, please let me or Cleone know. That way we're not wondering what's going on. At least we know that you're not going to be here. So I appreciate it. All right. Well, thanks everybody. I appreciate it. I know it's a little awkward. We're trying to get going here. So I'll be sending you some more reading material and try and absorb as much of it as you can. And we'll continue the discussions. And Josh, thanks again to you. Thanks, Carlton.
Thank you, Carlton.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.
You do adjourn the meeting. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Motion to adjourn the meeting?
Oh, yes.
Motion seconded by Thomas Golden.
Any discussion? All right.
And